In Enugu, Nigeria, the Christmas lights glowed brightly, but for young Chimamanda, the night felt darker than ever. She sat quietly in one corner of the living room, her small frame almost blending into the shadows, while laughter and joy filled the air around her. Relatives exchanged gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Cousins danced and showed off their new clothes, but Chimamanda had nothing to hold, nothing to smile about. Her dress was torn at the side, and though she tried to hide it with her hands, her cousins noticed and burst into cruel laughter. "Look at her dress," one of them said loudly, making the others laugh harder. Every giggle felt like a knife in her chest. She lowered her eyes, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. Her aunt leaned over to another woman and whispered harshly, "She's such a burden, always bringing shame." The words cut deeper than the laughter. Chimamanda could feel her face burning, but she stayed silent. Her own parents, sitting nearby, didn't defend her. In fact, they looked away, their eyes heavy with something that felt like shame of having her as their daughter. Chimamanda's heart sank. On Christmas Eve, when others celebrated love and family, she sat in humiliation, her tears threatening to fall. She wrapped her arms around herself, not for warmth, but to hold together the pieces of her breaking heart. That night, Christmas was not a celebration for her. It was a reminder that even at home she did not belong. Dinner was supposed to be the happiest part of Christmas Eve. The long table was filled with steaming rice, spicy jollof, fried chicken, and bottles of chilled drinks. Everyone's voices rose in laughter as plates were passed around and stories were shared. But for Chimamanda, every bite tasted bitter. She sat quietly at the end of the table, trying to disappear into the noise. She kept her head down, hoping no one would notice her. But they did. Her cousin Ibuka, who loved to be the loudest in the room, suddenly looked at her and smirked. Then, in a voice so loud that everyone could hear, he asked, "Why is she even here? She has nothing to offer." His words cut through the room like a sharp knife. For a moment, the table went silent. Then laughter erupted. It wasn't just a small laugh. It was the kind of laughter that stings, the kind that feels heavier than words. Chimamanda's face turned red, her chest tightened, and tears started to well in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away with her sleeve, hoping no one would notice. But they noticed, and the cruel laughter grew louder. One cousin covered her mouth, pretending to whisper, "Maybe she came just to eat free food." Another one pointed at her with mocking eyes, shaking his head like she was a joke. The more Chimamanda tried to hold back her tears, the harder they came. She turned her face slightly, hiding behind her hair, but her trembling shoulders gave her away. That only made them laugh louder, as if her pain was entertainment for them. "She's crying again," someone said with a laugh. "Always crying like a baby." Another cousin clapped his hands like it was a show, and the table shook with more laughter. Her hands shook as she placed her fork down. She couldn't eat anymore. The food on her plate blurred through the tears in her eyes. The voices around her felt like arrows hitting the same wound over and over again. She wanted to scream, to tell them how much it hurt, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. Finally, she stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. The laughter didn't stop. It followed her as she walked away. She felt like every step was heavier than the last. Her eyes burned, her cheeks were wet, and her heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. She reached the hallway, where the noise of laughter faded into the distance, but the echo of their words stayed with her. She pushed open the door to her small room and closed it behind her, pressing her back against the wooden frame. And then she let it all out. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. She buried her face into her hands, wishing she could disappear. That Christmas dinner wasn't a celebration for her. It was a stage where her humiliation was the main act. For Chimamanda, the mocking laughter was louder than the music, louder than the prayers, louder than everything else. And in that moment, she felt more alone than ever before. Chimamanda sat on the edge of her small bed, her face buried in her hands, her tears soaking through her palms. The sound of laughter from the dining room still echoed in her ears, but now she was alone in the silence of her room. And in that silence, the memories came rushing back like a flood. Years of pain she had carried quietly, years no one in her family ever cared to notice. She remembered the nights when the electricity was gone, and the whole neighborhood was dark. While her cousins slept peacefully, she sat by the weak light of a candle, books spread across her lap. The wax melted slowly, sometimes burning her fingers when she tried to adjust it. Her eyes ached, but she refused to stop reading. She wanted to learn, to prove that she could be something, even when no one believed in her. She remembered the mornings when her stomach was empty, yet she still went to school. She had taken up secret jobs just to survive, cleaning houses, selling snacks by the roadside, even carrying heavy loads for people at the market. She was just a child, but she worked like an adult because she knew that no one else would fight for her future. She hid those jobs from her family because she knew they would only mock her more. She remembered the countless times she had knocked on doors, asking for opportunities, scholarships, mentorship, anything that could help her move forward. But so many doors were slammed in her face. Some people laughed at her for daring to dream so big. Others told her she was wasting her time, that a girl like her could never achieve anything. She carried those rejections in her heart, each one heavier than the last, but she never let them kill her hope. And then there were the words, the cruel, cutting words from her own family. Her mother's voice still echoed in her mind. Stop chasing nonsense dreams. You are a girl. Focus on being useful in the kitchen. Her father's cold warning came back too. You will never amount to anything. Stop embarrassing us. Every insult was like a scar carved into her soul. To her family, she was always the useless daughter. The one who didn't fit in. The one they pointed at when things went wrong. The one who wore old clothes while her cousins got new ones. They didn't see her tears at night. They didn't see her hunger for something greater. All they saw was a burden, someone not worth believing in. But in that quiet room, even as the pain replayed in her mind, Chimamanda felt a fire burning deep inside. They had tried to break her, but somehow every candlelit night, every rejection, every cruel word had only made her stronger. She wiped her tears slowly and whispered to herself, "One day they will see me. One day they will know who I truly am." And in that moment, her pain turned into a quiet promise. A promise the world was not ready for yet. While her family laughed at her and called her useless, Chimamanda was living a life they could not even imagine. Behind the silence they mistook for weakness, she was building something powerful. She carried her pain quietly, but instead of letting it destroy her, she used it as fuel. Every insult, every rejection, every tear she shed became energy that pushed her forward. What they never knew was that the useless daughter they mocked had been working in secret. Late nights that they thought she spent crying were actually nights she spent creating. When her cousins were showing off new clothes and gadgets, she was sending out proposals, designing ideas, and teaching herself skills online with the little data she could afford. She was fighting a battle none of them ever saw. And then the world noticed her. She had entered a global innovation competition, one she never told her family about. Against all odds she won. Her idea, born out of those nights of struggle, caught the attention of international investors. While her family thought she was nothing, powerful people abroad saw her as a visionary. She traveled quietly, signed deals, and partnered with business leaders who believed in her dream. With their support, she launched a startup company in Lagos. It began small, just a few people in a rented office, but it grew faster than she ever imagined. The company was solving real problems, creating jobs and touching lives. Her name was already being whispered in boardrooms and tech conferences, yet at home she was still treated as the unwanted daughter. Chimamanda never corrected them. She let them believe she was struggling, let them mock her torn dresses and empty hands. She didn't share her victories, not even when her company's value climbed into the millions. She held back because she was waiting for the right moment, the perfect time when her truth would speak louder than their insults. Sometimes at night, she would smile to herself thinking of the day she would reveal everything. She pictured the shock on their faces, the silence that would fall after years of mocking laughter. She imagined her father's disbelief, her aunt's trembling voice, her cousin's wide eyes. She wasn't planning revenge. She just wanted them to finally see her, to know that the girl they dismissed had built an empire while they were busy tearing her down. They thought she had nothing. They thought she was a failure. But in reality, she was already feeding families through the jobs her company created. She was already being celebrated on stages far beyond Enugu. She was already living the life they never believed she could. The secret burned inside her like a hidden flame, waiting for the day it would burst into light. And when that day came, Chimamanda knew, it would change everything forever. Christmas morning arrived with music, laughter, and the smell of fresh food drifting through the house. The living room sparkled with decorations, and the sound of children tearing open gift wraps filled the air. Relatives sat together, proudly exchanging expensive presents. Shiny watches, gold earrings, new clothes, all were displayed with pride. In the middle of it all, no one even thought about Chimamanda. To them, she was invisible, the girl who never had anything to give. But then the door opened. Slowly, Chimamanda walked in. This time she was not in a torn dress. She wore an elegant outfit that seemed to glow with grace, her hair neatly done, her confidence shining brighter than the Christmas lights. In her hands, she carried a small gift bag and a neat brown envelope. The room, once filled with chatter, grew silent. Her uncle, always quick with his sharp tongue, broke the silence with a sneer. Back again to beg. His words drew a few quiet chuckles from the relatives, as if they expected the same story of shame. But Chimamanda didn't flinch. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she walked calmly to the table and placed the envelope in the center. Everyone's eyes followed her movements. Slowly, her father reached for the envelope and opened it. Inside were documents, papers carrying her name, stamped with international seals, news articles announcing her as the winner of a Global Innovation Award, contracts showing her partnership with foreign investors, and proof of her booming startup company worth millions of naira. The room froze. The laughter died instantly. Her uncle's smirk faded, replaced with disbelief. Her cousins leaned forward, their mouths slightly open. Her aunt blinked rapidly, as if the papers might disappear if she looked too long. Chimamanda's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. "All these years you called me useless. You mocked my tears, you laughed at my struggles. But while you were mocking, I was building. While you were tearing me down, I was rising." She lifted the gift bag and placed it beside the documents. "Inside this bag are keys," she said. "Not for me, but for families who now have homes because of my company. For children who can now go to school. While you treated me as nothing, I was creating something that now feeds hundreds." The weight of her words sank deep into the room. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One cousin dropped his half-opened gift box onto the floor, forgotten. No one knew what to say. The very girl they had mocked into silence had returned with a truth greater than any gift under the tree. For the first time, Chimamanda looked around the room and saw no laughter, only shock, guilt, and silence. And in that silence, she felt the power of her journey. Christmas morning was no longer their stage of mockery. It was her moment of revelation. The room was frozen. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke. The sound of Chimamanda's words still hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. A cousin sitting near the end of the table tried to lift his wine glass, but his hands trembled so badly that it slipped from his fingers and crashed to the floor. The red wine spread across the white tiles like spilled blood. No one even bent to clean it. Every eye was locked on Chimamanda. Her aunt, the same woman who once whispered that she was a burden, now struggled to form words. This can't be real," she muttered, her voice shaking. Her eyes darted between the documents on the table and Chimamanda's calm face, as if searching for some trick, some lie. But there was none. The truth was staring at them, undeniable and powerful. Chimamanda stood tall, her voice steady, cutting through the thick silence. "You mocked my tears. You called me useless. But today I feed hundreds of families through my work. Today I walk in with a truth bigger than your insults." The weight of her words hit like thunder. Her father lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. Her cousins shifted in their chairs, the same cousins who had laughed at her torn dress, now avoiding her gaze. The shame was heavy in the air, and not even the smell of Christmas food could mask it. One cousin whispered under his breath, "She's really the owner. She built this." His voice cracked with disbelief. Another relative, who once told her she would never succeed, now reached for the documents, scanning the pages desperately as if proof could erase the guilt. But every paper, every signature, every award only screamed one truth louder. Chimamanda was no longer the girl they mocked. She was a woman they could never ignore again. The silence was suffocating, and yet Chimamanda didn't rush to fill it. She let them sit in it, let them taste the bitterness of their own words. Her tears had once been their entertainment, but now their silence was her victory. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't angry. Her calmness was more powerful than any scream. Finally, her aunt spoke again, her voice low and unsteady. We didn't know." Chimamanda looked at her directly, her eyes clear and unwavering. "You didn't care to know," she replied. "I was always here working, fighting, dreaming. But to you I was invisible until now. You saw only weakness. You never saw the strength in my silence." The truth pierced the room like a blade. Some relatives looked down at their plates, ashamed. Others couldn't stop staring at her, their faces pale with shock. For the first time in her life, Chimamanda wasn't the one shrinking into a corner. She wasn't the one hiding her tears. It was her family's turn to feel small, their voices stolen by the power of a truth they could no longer laugh away. Her father, Ikenna, sat at the head of the table, but for the first time he looked smaller than everyone else. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of his chair. He had been silent the whole time, watching the documents, hearing his daughter's words, and feeling the weight of everything he had said to her over the years pressing down on his chest. This was the same man who once told her to stop wasting time with childish dreams. The same man who had laughed when she said she wanted to build something big, who told her to forget her books and focus on chores. The same man who had pointed to her cousins with pride and to her with shame. And now, the same daughter he dismissed had risen far above all of them. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat was tight, and his eyes burned with tears he had never allowed himself to show. Finally, in a trembling whisper, he said, "Chimamanda, forgive us." His voice cracked, heavy with regret. But Chimamanda didn't answer right away. She looked at him, the man she had once begged to believe in her, the man whose approval she longed for as a little girl. Her chest ached with memories. How many times had she cried herself to sleep because of his harsh words? How many times had she wished he would just say, "I'm proud of you"? But he never did. He only ever told her she was wasting her life. Now, here he was, broken in his guilt, finally realizing that the daughter he ignored had outgrown them all. He was no longer the strong voice of authority in the house. He was just a man who had failed to see the treasure in his own home. The silence between them was heavy. Relatives glanced nervously from father to daughter, waiting for her response. Chimamanda's eyes filled with tears, but they were not the tears of weakness from the night before. These were tears of strength, of pain carried for years. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Do you know how many nights I begged God for just one word of encouragement from you? Do you know how many times I prayed you would believe in me, just once?" Ikenna's head dropped, his shoulders shook as he whispered again, "I was wrong, forgive me." But the wound in her heart was deep. Forgiveness was not as simple as a word. Chimamanda stood tall, her voice steady. "I don't hate you, Papa. But the truth is, I stopped needing your approval a long time ago. You taught me nothing but pain, and yet it was that pain that pushed me to fight harder. So if I forgive you, it is not because you deserve it, it is because I refuse to carry your chains any longer." The room was silent. Ikenna wept quietly, realizing too late the cost of his blindness. For the first time, it wasn't his voice that held power, it was his daughter's. And in that moment, everyone knew the truth. Chimamanda had risen, and nothing could ever put her down again. The house that once echoed with cruel laughter was now filled with whispers and uneasy glances. The same relatives who had mocked Chimamanda just the night before were shifting in their seats, their pride melting away like wax in the sun. The truth they had seen on those documents was too powerful to deny, and slowly, their shame turned into desperation. One cousin, the same boy who had laughed the loudest when her dress was torn, leaned forward with a nervous smile. "Chimamanda, maybe you can help me. I've been looking for a job for months. If you could just connect me to your company, I would be grateful." His voice, once sharp with mockery, was now soft with pleading. Another cousin quickly joined in. Yes, me too. I know I laughed before, but I didn't mean it. You know how children are. She forced a laugh, pretending the past was just a joke. If you could give me a chance, I promise I will work hard. Even her aunt, who had once whispered that she was a burden, now cleared her throat and spoke carefully. My daughter will graduate soon. Maybe you can find a place for her in your company? You know, families should help each other. Her voice trembled, as if she knew how hollow her words sounded. Chimamanda listened quietly, her face calm but her heart remembering every sting of their insults. She looked around at them. These were the same people who once mocked her tears, who had laughed at her pain like it was entertainment. Now, those same mouths were begging for opportunities. Those same eyes were searching for mercy. She finally spoke, her voice steady, carrying both pain and strength. I remember every word you threw at me. Every laugh, every insult, every time you made me feel small. Do you think I forgot? Success is not for mocking voices. It's for believing hearts. The words hit the room like a storm. Some relatives lowered their eyes in shame. Others tried to force smiles, but no one could deny the truth. They had all failed her when she needed them most. Chimamanda continued, her tone sharper now. When I worked in silence, none of you believed in me. When I struggled, none of you helped me. But now that the world sees me, you suddenly remember I am family. Family is not about blood, it is about support. And you gave me none. Her cousins shifted uncomfortably, their fake smiles gone. For once they had no reply. The truth was too heavy. Chimamanda stood tall, her presence filling the room. She had once been the girl pushed into the corner, but now the tables had turned completely. The same people who once mocked her now looked small in front of her. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. She didn't need their approval, their respect, or their begging. She had already won. Chimamanda could have turned her back on them all. She could have shouted, insulted them, or reminded them of every cruel word they once threw at her. But she didn't. Instead, she chose something greater. She had learned long ago that anger only keeps you tied to the people who hurt you. And she refused to let them control her anymore. Her strength was different. It came from surviving nights of hunger, from reading under candlelight, from wiping her own tears when no one else cared. That strength had shaped her into a woman who no longer needed revenge. What she wanted was change, not just for herself, but for others who were walking the same lonely road she once walked. So, while her family begged for favors, Chimamanda focused her energy somewhere else. She poured her success into helping strangers, because she knew the pain of being rejected. She knew what it felt like to be the child no one believed in, the one mocked for dreaming. And she promised herself that no other child who crossed her path would feel that same pain. She began by funding scholarships for children in poor communities. Little boys and girls who once had no hope of school suddenly wore uniforms, carrying books with pride. Some of them reminded her of herself, shy, quiet, but burning with potential. Whenever she saw their smiles, Chimamanda felt her own wounds heal a little more. She also built community centers where young people could learn skills, use computers, and dream without limits. She didn't care if they were strangers because to her, they were family in spirit, the kind of family who supported, not mocked. Every time she handed out opportunities, she thought of how her own family had denied her one, and it made her more determined to give freely. Even when journalists asked her about her relatives, she never spoke with bitterness. She simply said, "My story is not about revenge. It's about hope. If I had waited for my family to believe in me, I would still be in the corner of that room, crying. But I believed in myself, and now I believe in others." Her choice shocked many. People expected her to boast or to cut off those who once mocked her. But instead, she turned her pain into purpose. And that is what made her story powerful. At night, when she thought about her journey, Chimamanda sometimes still felt the sting of old wounds. But then she would remember the laughter of children in schools she funded, the gratitude of mothers whose families now had food because of her company, the hope in the eyes of teenagers who now dared to dream bigger. And she would smile. Her resolve was steely, unshakable. She had turned her scars into bridges, her humiliation into strength. The girl once mocked as useless had become a woman who gave others the very thing she was denied: love, belief, and a chance to rise. The hall in Lagos glittered with lights as people gathered for the Christmas charity gala. The room was filled with business leaders, young dreamers, and families whose lives had been touched by Chimamanda's work. When she stepped onto the stage, the applause began, but the crowd grew even quieter as she lifted the microphone. Everyone wanted to hear her story. She looked around the hall, her eyes shining with emotion. "Last Christmas," she began, her voice steady but full of feeling, "they mocked my tears. They laughed at me when I had nothing. But this Christmas, my tears have built bridges for others. Those same tears now pay school fees for children, build homes for families, and open doors for dreamers who were once like me." The audience leaned closer, hanging on her every word. She paused, letting the weight of her story sink in. Then she spoke again, this time with even more strength. "If you are being mocked today, if people tell you that you are useless, don't break. Don't give up. Your truth is coming. And when it arrives, it will silence every voice that ever doubted you." A murmur of emotion ran through the hall. Some people wiped tears. Others nodded deeply as if she had spoken directly to their souls. And then the entire room erupted into applause. It was not just polite clapping. It was thunderous, heartfelt, unstoppable. That night, her story spread far beyond the gala. Clips of her speech flooded social media, her words traveling across Africa and beyond. She was no longer just the girl once mocked in Enugu. She was now a symbol of strength, a voice for the broken, and proof that no insult can stop a determined heart.